So we just got done leading a panel for the finalists, and I'll tell you, it's one of my favorite things I do all year. They don't pay me for it, but to run that award process and to meet these people, they're just so incredible. So hopefully some of you saw that. The thing I do for a living, though, is I do research. And on Gen AI, I've been doing some of that work, right? Because we're all doing research on Gen AI. So what I want to do is I want to share with you some things. By the way, I'm George Westerman. I've been at Sloan for 20-something years now. I do a lot on digital transformation. The last 5 years or so, I've been thinking a lot about skills and careers. Because it seems like with digital transformation, we've been transforming everything except the HR processes, right? Of helping people learn, about helping people develop. It's happening. It's just been a little slower than before. And so one of the things that came up, I got together with a colleague from Georgia Tech, Mariam Alavi, and thinking about what I know about innovation and digital and AI, and what she knows about knowledge management. What does this mean for knowledge work? So we just put together a perspective. It was in Harvard Business Review. We could share that. And I want to share kind of what we talked about, but I don't want to spend the whole time on slides. So I want to kind of frame some things up, give some ideas, but then let's have some discussions about where we're going to go. Is that fair? Okay, great. I also don't stand still very well, so I will not be up at the podium too much probably. Well, they didn't give me a clicker, so we'll see. AI is getting a lot of attention. And so, if you want analytics, you go to Google, right? And what's interesting here is there's AI. Somewhere around Thanksgiving, boom, this popped up. And we know that, right? Generative AI. What's fascinating, though, is you got to use the right words, right? We're talking about generative AI, but what we're really talking about is ChatGPT, right? And everybody, they can spell ChatGPT. If they've never used it, whatever, they're talking about it, right? A friend of mine's a psychologist, and who was saying, well, so is this going to, a psychiatrist, is this going to replace what I'm doing? How can it help me? George, you're the expert. I'm like, I know nothing about psychiatry, right? But, so it's just getting a lot of attention. And what that means is we got this problem here that there's a lot of fashion going on, a lot of bandwagon, right? Everybody wants to be in there. We've been talking about that a lot. There's also just a fear. What does this mean for skills? Will we be there or not? Certainly a lot of companies have been doing stuff in this space, right? This is year-old data, and already 70% of people were doing something with marketing with generative AI. And yet also, only about a quarter of people have ever used this stuff. And there's also a real demographic change here, right? All of us, the white-collar, college-educated people, many of us have used it, have talked about it, but the rest of the country, not in the white-collar places, maybe not have used it the same way. More fear, more questions about what that's going to be about. Okay. So this is what we used to worry about. This is what got me into thinking about skills, right? Is our jobs will be useless because, this is about 2017, I guess. We launched a big thing in MIT called the Work of the Future Initiative. And the real question for this is what jobs will be left when the robots take over, right? Got our smartest people together. What we learned is the robots aren't taking over that fast, right? We also learned, what we've heard from McKinsey, from MIT analysts and everything else, that it's tasks that get taken away, not jobs, right? And the question is, how many of those taken away tasks do you have in your job? And how do you need to rework there? Here are some tasks that are being taken over by AI, right? When I designed a course three years ago, a digital course, I spent a lot of time in front of a camera recording me doing 5-minute segments of things. And I had, of course, I'm not good at doing the first take, so I had to record the same 5 minutes like 7 times to get one that worked, right? So, these 3-hour marathon recordings to get 20 minutes of video. And I had to put a suit on, and I had to look good, and the lighting had to be just right and everything. We just designed a course now for some stuff we're doing in Manila. Didn't record me saying anything. What we recorded was we gave a script to a chatbot, and they recorded a nice 2-minute video, including plugging in the B-roll, right? So it just happened. It took about a half an hour, right? A completely different experience. This is a really nice, I'm not saying synesthesia, it's actually a really good thing, but 15 minutes to produce a video, and she looks like that, but she can look like anything you want her to look like, and she can speak any language you want. So if you think about, your marketing materials, your training materials, that kind of stuff, that job is going away, right? But there's plenty more to do, right? Shopify, there are a lot of people, Amazon Turkey in many ways got invented to do things like, give me a description to put up on my website for that funky looking camera, that funky looking lamp, right? It'll do it now for you. And it'll actually also change the tone for what you want to say. So those jobs are going away, right? Interesting here, Marks and Spencer, which is, you know what they are, but Tapestry, that's Coach, that's Kate Spade. That's things I don't buy because I can't afford to buy them, right? And those are really important to get the customer experience right. They're starting to say, let's walk you through, let's hold your hand through the customer experience with generative AI, right? So these are jobs that, okay, maybe those people working in the stores, maybe those are going away. So there's a lot that is starting to be automated. In all of these were examples of knowledge work, right? But then again, we have other things. Oh, and this one here, of course, this was the big news release a couple months ago. 2.3 million conversations, 2/3 of their customer service, doing the work of 700 full-time agents. The AI is doing it. First line support, second line support done by the computer, then the other people can get in. Now the interesting thing, of course, it's a growing business. They can't hire fast enough. Second, nobody stays in a customer service job very long, so they've got a lot of turnover. And third of all, the third tier support, it's a little frustrating, but it's actually more interesting too than, oh, you need to change your password again, or whatever, right? So while the headline was 700 full-time agents, in their case, it's actually allowing people to do better work and not having to fill those boring, what did he call them? Mind-numbing something jobs. Chris Beatty called it in the last session, right? And then this, of course. How many people are using, or your friends are using this, right? And I don't code anymore, but my understanding is it's working, right? People feel like it's really helpful. So this is not replacing jobs, it's augmenting jobs. Right? It's helping you be better. And it's also helping you, as I understand it, doing things like following the coding standards and documenting all the stuff we never wanted to do. It'll do it for you, right? And then even harder stuff, right? This was 20 years ago when Google's AI was able to start figuring out how would these proteins fold in certain ways. It used to be you outsourced it and people would guess. Then this was really cool stuff. And now it's happening routinely, not only to say how will they fold, but let's get a drug for this particular target. That's pretty neat. You're not replacing the scientists, you're just making the scientists faster. And same thing here, maybe a little less science, but still important. This motorcycle frame needs to do certain things. What should it look like? And I've never seen one that looks like that, but that will do the job, right? And that will do the job even if you wouldn't have designed it that way. And a factory, by the way, if I need to lay a factory out on AutoCAD, you start with a blank space, you start putting it in there. Listen, I need to do a factory that's going to design motorcycles. Can you design it for me? Now let me just mess with it a little bit, right? And we're seeing the same thing with PowerPoints and other things. Well, that the slides, these other things are being done. So this is augmentation, it's not replacement, right? You've all heard this quote. AI won't replace you, somebody using AI will. By the way, I hate it when we have quotes and you can't find who gave it, especially because I'm the one who's being quoted sometimes, right? And so, if you don't know who said it in management, you just say, you say Mark Twain said it, you say Peter what's his name said it, right? What's that? The chatbot wrote it, yeah. So anyway, as far as I could tell, Santiago Valderramas wrote this. I don't know who he is, but he's the first time I could find it, so we'll give him credit for that, okay? So, listen, my thought on the first thing that we need to know, all of us as knowledge workers, we need the basic knowledge of this. The first thing you need to know about AI is it's not intelligent. It's not going to take your job. It's what somebody uses it for that's going to take your job. Can it optimize better? Can it speak language better? Can it do creative stuff better? That's what's going to happen. But we need to remember this, and so much of the world doesn't get this. Right? So the first step is, it's just another tool. It's a statistical technique that's going to get you there, right? And we need to remember this part. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? So I mentioned that Miriam wrote this article to think through. She's a knowledge management expert. I do a lot with digital, with innovation, and AI. If we put this together, what would AI do to knowledge work? And we basically sat down and said, here's what we think might be possible. Here's a framework.
here are some examples. Maybe this makes sense. So hopefully this makes sense for what you're thinking about. First of all, what is knowledge work?
Of course, as academics, you have to define your terms, right? So what is knowledge work? It's typically dependent on advanced training and specialization. So if you're just picking up this paper and moving it over there, that's hard to call that knowledge work, right? You got to have some knowledge involved, some specialization, and that's important because then the automation, it's a little trickier to automate, right? And number two, we need to think about the kinds of tasks. Your job is made of tasks, and those tasks, some of them are structured and some of them are unstructured. So the structured tasks, well-defined, well understood. We know inputs, outputs, and the conversion process. And we all have pieces that we do of that, right? So, running payroll. That's a pretty structured task. You still have to have people in there, but it's a pretty structured task. Scheduling appointments, I'm not saying you can do it without people, but we know how to do that. And by the way, I have something that now helps to schedule appointments, but it's not really. It just is self-service appointment scheduling, right? And that works really pretty well. It saves me that time. Then you got the unstructured things that most of you do, or most of us claim to do, right? That you can't write a formula for what I do, right? And so we might know the inputs, we might know the outputs, but the conversion process can be difficult, right? And so, designing products, negotiating, resolving conflicts, a lot of these soft skills that she talked about yesterday are in that world. And they're harder to automate. Now, the interesting thing is, remember when the rule for the test for whether you are a computer or not is, can I have a conversation with you and you wouldn't know that it's not a person? Well, we've blown that out of the water, right? So that kind of, that Turing test is gone, but it's still this unstructured stuff. The other thing we want to think about is routine and non-routine, right? And I've done some work that shows that if you are doing routine tasks, computers are taking your jobs pretty quickly. If you're doing non-routine, the more you know technology, you put that together, you have synergies there, then you can still win. If you don't know the technology, there's less there, right? So we want to think, routine, non-routine is kind of aligned with structured, unstructured, but of course, they're slightly different. Okay. So what we did is we said, okay, let's take this idea of structured and unstructured, and let's think about what generative AI can do, and we found 3 ways that it's going to help. Number 1 is reducing your cognitive load. Number 2 is boosting your cognitive capacities. And number 3 is learning. Lots of learning opportunity. Okay? So I just want to go through all 3 of those. If we think about that unstructured, structured framework and the technology side, what do we do? Well, let's take the structured tasks and let's just offload them. We shouldn't be doing these things anyway, right? That's what we got interns to do, right? But now the computer can be our intern, right? And so the thing about the generative AI is now we can do that stuff, right? So personalizing marketing emails. I don't know if you've seen what the Adobe suite can do, but it is really incredible, right? Not only the personalization, but the images can change day to day, person to person, just like that. It's really pretty impressive, right? Generating or customizing, we've talked about that a minute ago. Translation, right? It would be interesting to see what happens in the UN, those people who their whole job is, that is routine cognitive work, right? Or it's the structured cognitive work. But how about here? Several banks I know, started with one I heard and now others, the minute somebody releases a financial report, or the minute you have the CEO talk at the quarterly conference, that's processed instantly. Our models are updated, our competitive position with them or our ratings of those are updated instantly by the machines. Now a person still goes and checks them, but what used to take hours now takes minutes, which in the Wall Street world matters, right? And then also case law. I don't know, have you heard about the joke about not the joke, but the real thing where the lawyer took ChatGPT to court, right? And got really reamed out by the judge, right? Now, with these small language models, with the trained models, you can do it now, right? How does this contract link with ours? What is this non-disclosure? How does this work? Or can you just draft a contract for me? So things we would ask the legal assistants to do, Meghan Markle's kind of job, right? On suits. Now, can the computers do that kind of stuff instead? And it's happening. By the way, hay fever is really acting up for me. My friend Abby gave me this stuff she calls, she says it's perfect for this, so that's why I'm drinking it. It has an interesting name. It's called Slippery Elm. So either I will resolve my cough here and be able to talk to you, or I will start like seeing wild things. So, so hopefully it will help my cough. So.
Old-time baseball pitchers used to put it on the ball so it would boom oddly.
Ooh, okay.
Affects the grip.
Great.
So hopefully, she's a pretty good person, so she won't do anything crazy to me, right? So, so reducing the cognitive load, right?
Can we, the stuff we would give to interns, can we have the computer do it? And if the computer do it, it might do better than the interns, and it also will just allow us to do the other kinds of things that we're supposed to be doing. Number one, what can you reduce?
What can you reduce in the cognitive load? For me, what am I doing? Papers come out, and I can, you know, a lot of papers have an abstract. I can scan and say what's not in the abstract, right? And the other thing is, consulting firms don't put an abstract out, so but you still get the 30 pages. What the heck did they just say in here, right? Yeah. Or hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. And so, and then we have the, you know, I didn't really want to go to that meeting anyway. Can I just send my bot, right? So we, you know, all of these things are happening, and it works. It really works, right? For doing, excuse me. So offloading the structured tasks to free up capacity. By the way, all this stuff, me coughing, me blowing my nose, is now on video for perpetuity. So hopefully, there we go. Good, good. Okay. So that's reducing the cognitive load. Next up, boosting our cognitive capability. This is what I had not thought about, but there are really good examples that are out there. How can we take the structured tasks and be better at those structured tasks? And for example here, you know, there's a study out of MIT showing that you can have the generative AI help you ask better questions about the problem you're in. It's not how do I solve this problem, it's how do I think about this problem? And the question, so, and it works, right? Now, not all the questions are great, but there are some of them that are good, right? Idea generation, you know, here's a problem, what might I do about this situation? Like a medical diagnosis, but you're kind of diagnosing a company, right? Great at storytelling, great at making connections across, you know, how's this related to this and how does that apply to this company? If there's enough information out there you could do. One thing I'm finding that's really useful is I'm a pretty good writer, but I'm terrible at coming up with cool names for things. And so what I can do is I can say, okay, what, you know, here's a session we're doing. What's a good name? And it'll give me 5 names, one of which is way better than I ever would have come up with, right? And so just having it do that kind of thing, right, the brainstorming. And also here in knowledge management has been a problem forever. And this seems to be a really good tool to make it happen. For 2 problems. One problem is what do we know so I can learn from that? So Morgan Stanley now has an AI bot for wealth management. What have I learned about wealth management? What can I advise my people on? Now, I still have to advise them, but what can I do? But the other thing it's really good for is a real problem with knowledge management systems is getting what we know into the system. So those of you in consulting now, you just give it your case book, you give it your case files, it'll summarize, it'll index, it'll do all that stuff for you if you want to. All that stuff that we would always get around to but never did, right? It'll just do that. Okay? So this is boosting our cognitive capabilities in ways we couldn't. And then the last piece here, learning. This is also something I didn't expect to see, and it's turning out to be brilliant at it. So Copilot in many ways helps you learn, right? But we, for example, are developing a teaching assistant for Python class. It turns out that you lose a lot of really good programmers because they don't get through that first Python course. And what happens if they're like me, especially if you're in some of these schools, you're doing your homework at midnight, you need to call the TA. There's no TA that works at midnight. And so then you miss that concept, and then you're kind of screwed for the whole semester, right? Because you missed that key point. We're making a TA who's always with you. A TA not only who's always with you, but who knows you and can help you think through those problems, right? Now the problem we've got right now as we program it is that it wants to give you the answer. And a good TA is not going to give you the answer, right? The TA is going to say, have you thought about this? So we're still working through that idea, right? But we're testing this at Georgia State.
a giant minority-serving institution to say, you know, there are people could get in great jobs. They don't necessarily have the academic background that because of the way they grew up. Let's get them in these jobs. Can we get them through this first course, and from there they can do great things? And we're doing randomized trials to figure that out, right? But it's happening other places. Call center. This is a group. There's some really good studies out there showing call centers everybody gets better, and the newest people get better fast, because it can not only help you at the end and say you could have done this, but it can suggest while you're working, that person's sounding confused. Try saying this, right? You've seen this kind of stuff work, yeah. It's unbelievable what can happen. It's like having a coach sitting right next with you, right? And more we're also seeing it as a role play foil. Somebody to play the other side of a role play. How do you teach these human skills? How do you assess these human skills? You can take, say, a course in critical thinking or a course in empathy, but that doesn't tell you anything until you practice it, right? And so now the problem with role plays is you got to hire somebody to play that other part of the role. You don't have to now. So I just found, just yesterday, I heard this great example that I think is a brilliant way that I hope to teach some of this social emotional skills. How about this one? Can a moody AI girlfriend make men more emotionally intelligent? I haven't tried it out yet. Luckily, I'm married. I don't need an AI girlfriend, but still.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Your girlfriend and mother fall into a river at the same time. You save your mother first. Your girlfriend's upset. What do you do about that, right? It's a really interesting idea. Okay, so anyway, this idea that you can learn, that there can be a good learning. So, you know, here's Cresta, AI coaching. Really good, right? It does really great. Once again, I'm not promoting these companies. It's just the companies I know about. And here's some of the work, right? These are good randomized trials out of MIT in a call center. 34% better improvement for everybody. Oh, sorry, 14% improver for everybody, 34% better for the novices. Not only do you help the novices get better, but if you're not slamming them all the time for being bad, they might actually stay with you, right? Okay. And here, that's call center. You say, okay, call center, pretty routine work. We know how to do that. How about BCG consultants? And in BCG consultants, 12% more tasks on average, 25% more quickly, 40% higher quality as assessed by other people. Okay? So it's not just the simple stuff. Sometimes it's the hard stuff. What they found at BCG, though, there's also sometimes if you ask it the wrong thing, you're in trouble. So you got to be careful about what you ask it. Okay? And it's one of the things, you know, there are lots of things that could be the wrong thing, but one of the things could be, give me a strategy for John's company. Well, the only way we're going to know that is to know enough about John's company, and there's not all that much public knowledge. Well, your company there is, but not as much public knowledge out there for these small companies as there are for places. So that's, you know, when we think about human skills, for example, can we test these things? Can we train these things? Can we show them where we're going? So I have some other stuff I wanted to share, but I wanted to stop there. How are you seeing this stuff working for you? How are you using this for knowledge work? How are you seeing it improving your people? What do you think?
I'm happy to
Yeah.
share. So Robin Stein, I'm a partner at PwC. I think we look at it primarily in 2 ways. One is, and we've talked a lot about this in some of the previous sessions, but democratizing it and making it available to all 75,000 of our people in the U.S.
Democratizing what?
Gen AI.
Okay, gotcha.
And the
Yeah.
technology tools by giving it to all our people. So
Mhm.
we've done that with a chat GPT equivalent,
Right.
Copilot, things of that nature. But then equally important, we feel like some of that top down and seeing what are our knowledge workers doing as it relates to tax or audit work? What are those processes that we can look at and embed AI in and drive significant efficiency in those areas is how we've approached it.
So you're doing the bottom up. How can you be better? But tell us about it so we can learn from it.
Correct.
And second of all, top down, we're going to make your job better and tell you what we did. Okay, great. John, yeah.
Just to build on it,
Yeah.
PwC as well. So one of the things that we did was we installed a monitoring capability, would look at how I asked the question and then maybe how I asked follow-up questions. And that would create a sort of a graph, a knowledge graph of how I interacted and maybe what assumptions I was making about the answer.
So not only for the process, but you as somebody, as a worker, you as a person to interact with.
Correct. And then our team would look at these graphs and identify patterns of use that might be more productive. Maybe we could fine tune, well, we wouldn't fine tune a model. We would create a RAG process to improve the way I ask questions, the way I might act on it.
I'm just imagining those online sites, AITA, you know what that stands for, right? Am I the whatever? And this says, yeah, you really are, right? It says that, right? And it tells you how to fix it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I like your, one of the points that you made about it not being intelligent is something I say to clients all the time. I actually tell, it's more like a precocious 10-year-old. It knows how to read just about anything, but it doesn't know how to judge whether what it's reading is helpful or unhelpful, et cetera. And I do think a feedback loop of some kind, whether it's with an individual user or at a platform level within the company, to look at how it's being used and then feed that back into the model.
Wonderful. Are you finding different generations are reacting to this differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just, sorry, I don't want to.
No, it's fine, yeah.
The average age of our employees is 27 years
Oh,
old.
yeah, that's right.
I will say that.
Children.
So that helps.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, cool.
But the curmudgeons are generally the more senior partners.
And they know how to do it.
Yeah, how to be curmudgeons.
Yeah. It's like in Moneyball, right? The analysts were actually pretty good, but the scouts were not convinced that kid with a computer could be any good at all, right? So you're probably running into that. Yeah, so Steve, what are you seeing?
No, sorry, just in terms of the generational thing, there's so many thoughts and like whatnot. Yes, I'm a consultant and I deal with a lot of places that don't want to be dealt with, law firms historically. Senior partners are very much curmudgeonly. But interestingly, I look at my youngest son's 20. And the word I would put on what you just said is discernment. These tools don't have any discernment, and that's why you need the human beings and blah, blah, blah. My 20-year-old almost embodies, well, it was on the internet, it must be true. And there's a whole broader theme here, like yesterday's opening, the role, critical thinking and liberal education and blah, blah, blah. But that kind of concerns me too. The notion of privacy. Why is this a big deal if I'm emailing this or, my father used to put his social security number in as part of his passwords. He lived into his 80s, okay, he just stopped doing that.
He didn't have any money, but the
right.
money got stolen, yeah.
Well, I know after. And I don't know how representative my son is, but at least amongst his peer group, I'm a little bit afraid because they don't even think to ask the question. Why do he's filling out job applications for summer internships.
Yeah.
Why do they need to know all this stuff? Because it's just on the form, doesn't mean you have to fill it out, except you can't submit the form if you don't.
Right, yeah. It's interesting. I'm noticing also that the generated text is pretty bland.
Yeah.
And are we going to then, is the younger generation using this so much, are we going to just lower the standards for what good means? Already happening? Oh, it says the marketing people, right? Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah.
and how are you countering that, or how are you countering that?
It's interesting. We have clients now starting to ask, are you using Gen AI tools and having us agree to not use their information unless we let them know what they're using. It's happening.
Huh?
And everything is starting to sound the same. So if you see the word esteemed, unwavering, thrilled,
It's interesting also, when I turn in articles now for publishing, they say, did you use generative AI? And I don't know, did I? I used Bing, does that count? Or, but yeah.
You run it through a tool,
Yeah.
but if the tool has been trained on what you already wrote, it'll come back and say.
I sound just like myself. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. You want to say? You want to say something? Yeah, you pointed. You have to say something now.
I don't. I'm emphatically interested in the thoughts.
That's interesting. What I do here from the people that know a lot more about this than I do is that the detection algorithms are not working, and so you just don't use it. Yeah.
Well, those are AI.
Oh, they're AI too. That's true. Yeah. They don't want to rat each other out, I guess. The bots. Yeah. Any other thoughts? How are you using it, or what challenges are you running into in trying to use these things? Yeah.
So I work for state government, so So we're wrestling now with what we can retain using AI, what we train generative AI on. I really like the idea of democratization. So kind of following that, what do you think the chances are that, 3 to 5 years from now, AI is ubiquitous? It's not a competitive advantage anymore, and it's affordable. Companies can't lock in their membership based upon the AI and its availability. It is just out there.
I think, 20 years ago when I first started teaching, we had this article called IT Doesn't Matter. And the idea was that, the point they were making is, okay, so you got a good network, who cares, right? It's like electricity. And I think we're going to get there. I think the fact that you have it, AI will be electricity. The question is, what do you do with it? And in his case, he had a really compelling title and a really arguable argument, but it got him attention, so it didn't matter. And it'll be the same thing here, right? What do you do with the technology when you got it? But AI should be like turning on a faucet. It should be there should be cloud AI, right? Now the question would be, well, okay, networking, you can do that independent of what you're doing, right? You let your processes ride on it. AI, it's hard to let your processes run on an AI platform. You got to change. So there will be something that happens there too. But the ubiquity, I mean, that's what's, I think, so exciting about OpenAI and these others is that you don't need a programmer to do it. That also means you don't need a programmer to do things really badly. So, yeah. How are you using it? What challenges are you running into? Yeah.
So I'm reminded of the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right? You made the comment that maybe the standards of writing is coming down, but in my interaction for somebody for whom the English is a second language, they have never written so well. So, completely different perspective, but I understand the higher standard, but I also think there is a huge population that is actually starting to communicate better and express things that they have never able to do before.
That's interesting. You just had a new use case I've got to try is, when somebody writes something that really pisses you off and you fire off that email, wouldn't it be nice if you could say, can you make this sound nice before I send it? Yeah, question, yeah.
Well, just a comment and an affirmation of a few of the recent things. So I work at MIT, not faculty, but I have friends who are faculty there, and one of the use cases is exactly what you just described, right? So I know a faculty chair who will use Gen AI to soften letters where he's like, I'm really upset at so-and-so, but I send it as is. Could you just lighten the mood on this one? He runs it through, and then he'll send that. Right?
This is going to make my wife so happy because she's the one who has to do that for me right now. She's like, you don't want to say that.
On the flip side, I've got another faculty friend who has students and postdocs for whom English is not their first language, right? And they're writing very scientific papers, and they're running Gen AI through to help with the abstract and the intro. And it's funny, my friend he's very afraid of being that guy who used Gen AI to write something that was not accurate, right?
Right, yeah.
Case where there were cases that were not real, that were being cited. But reading through it, he said it did improve, to this point, it did improve what this student could have written on his own because of the English being a second language. And on the surface, it reads well, but only if you're an expert in the field would you have noticed that there were inaccuracies.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's part of the catch, is especially when you get very specialized content, these Gen AIs are not good enough yet
Right.
to really pull out these differences that an expert can really flesh out.
Okay, cool. So we have just a minute left. I want to share just one other little framework that we published recently on how to think about this. And as you're thinking about putting these in for yourself or for your business, there's lots of things to do AI. The problem we've got right now is we've got a lot of hammers looking for nails. Or actually, I was talking to a French firm yesterday, and they said AI is a knife looking for a person. And so, wow, a very French kind of comment, right? So, what you hear, right? Fahim is one of our finalists. We're always looking for extraordinary experiences. Then the tools are underneath. And I think we need to be careful about that, right? We don't invest in AI at Airbus. We invest in a business problem. And I think the first question is, what are we doing in our knowledge work that is a problem that needs to be solved, as opposed to how can I use ChatGPT one different way, right?
And then another thing to think about is maybe there's some questions you can ask. And I'm spending a lot of time right now talking to very senior people in companies that are just, George, spend an hour and help me understand this AI thing. I got an hour, why not, right? But, so we could talk about what that is. But one of the things you can talk about, at least for the generative AI questions, is some questions you can ask, okay? So number one, what's the cost of being wrong? Generative AI is getting better, but if you're doing medical diagnoses, maybe not, right? Or some of those stock trades, right? Number two, does it have to be explainable? Does it have to be repeatable? Do you need the same answer over and over again? Because you will never have that happen in this space. And what's our cost for our private information getting out? Now what's happening is these tools are getting better and better. You can buy your private instances of these things. You can buy your specialized language models and this kind of thing. But one of the questions you can say is, if the answer to any of these is yes, think really hard about the generative AI and how to make sure to avoid some of these problems you're going to have. And of course, the other thing you have to do with machine learning and models in general, but in generative AI, we don't control that. Do we have a real source of truth other than thumbs up, thumbs down? And how generalizable is your training data? So these are just some good questions you can ask as you're applying it for yourself. I'm not saying that if the answer is yes, don't do it. But if the answer is yes, on the left-hand side at least, be careful and figure out how to do it in a careful way and how to use the right tools. So there's an HBR article on this, on 4 kinds of AI and others that can help you think through it. Okay? So let's see, what do we have? If we had more time, so that means this is homework. I do have more time?
If you would like more time.
If you would like more
you're
time,
welcome to more time.
You
I
can
know
go to 2:30.
we're just going to networking, whatever, until 3. So you can network with George for 15 minutes or longer if he's willing.
Okay, so a problem to be done, homework for yourselves, but if you want to talk about it, we can stick around here and talk about this. What does this mean for careers? Okay, so companies, Abby and I, Abby's not here, but Abby and I wrote this article. We went out to talk to companies and we said, how do you develop people? And they said, oh, we're great. We said, how do you develop anybody who's not a high potential? And they said, oh, right? And we heard 2 lies. One lie is, well, every boss is responsible to develop their people. It sounds really good, right? But even if you want to do it, and I can't argue that many of my bosses ever wanted to do it, right? If I want to do anything other than take my boss's job, it's really hard for them to advise me, right? Number 2, the other lie is, we just gave you all these tools, you can manage your own career progression. Sounds really great, right? But it's a heck of a lot more than just taking that course and who's going to give you the chance? Who's going to let you try out that role, right? That kind of thing. So how do we get around those lies? And sorry, they're not lies, they're just partial truths, right? How do you develop everybody else? You do what you do for the high potentials, but you do it at a higher scale. Help people understand the pathways not only up, but over. So one company we studied, UPMC Medical, now you can say, out of the 200,000 employees, I'm in this job, where has anybody gone from my job? And if I want to try that job, hit a button, it'll email somebody who's in that used to be in my job, and they can tell me what it's about, right? Imagine what we could do with AI in that space to make that even more interesting, right? Number 2, the learn and practice. What can AI do to help the learning and practice? We've talked about some of that. And the other is the feedback and coaching. So when we've been talking about AI as being changing knowledge work, can it change the whole way we develop our people? And what are you guys doing, or what could we be doing to make that happen? It doesn't have to be a problem to replace you now. It could actually help to design people better. Yes?
I think this is an awesome point. One of the thoughts I've had is whether AI is going to create more tension between unions and enterprises in general. And this aspect of things, there's a lot to get worked through in that conversation. It's not, it's a multi-party kind of dialogue. But if enterprises were to think about this more, consistently, and leverage AI to help, again, in that coaching and training and tuning and whatnot process for the individual, it could take some tension out of the system. That's the Pollyanna.
view of it. But
And not only for unions, 'cause I think it's a really interesting question for unions, but if you're in a consulting firm, so much of your job in a consulting firm is impression management. What do the bosses think of me? And so there's certain questions you will not ask your boss.
right.
But could the bot coach you
Yeah.
and keep you out of that trouble, right? Yeah, interesting. So that's homework for you, right? If you want to talk about it more, you're welcome. I'd love to talk to you more, but I also want to let you get to the break. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating.